Welcome to Jotindi, Journey to the Inner Divine, a sacred space for healing energy, emotional release, and soulful transformation. If you're ready to live with joy, ease, and purpose, you're in the right place. Hi, welcome back. I am really glad that you're here today because today's episode is really going to change the way you see things. And this episode's a little bit personal for me. Honestly, probably more personal than a lot of the recent episodes I've done. Because lately I've been moving through some health challenges of my own, and it's really been forcing me to rethink the way that I view healing entirely. And I realized something that I think a lot of people quietly carry shame around, that sometimes you're not resisting healing. Sometimes your body is just exhausted. Sometimes your nervous system's overwhelmed, or your body's in pain, or your inflammation is high, your hormones are off, your stress levels are through the roof. Maybe you're not sleeping properly. And on top of all of that, you're trying to do deep emotional healing work too. And eventually, you just hit a wall and you can't journal your way out of a complete nervous system exhaustion. You can't spiritually bypass a body that is screaming for support. And you can't shame yourself into faster healing. And I think that a lot of people, including myself, really need permission to hear that. Because in healing spaces, and honestly, in most spiritual spaces, there can sometimes be this pressure to constantly be growing or processing, evolving, regulating, healing, meditating, doing the shadow work, staying positive, staying aligned, all this stuff, right? And it can be exhausting. And if you're physically struggling while trying to do all of that, it can start to feel like you're failing. Like, why can't I stay consistent? Or why do I feel so overwhelmed? Or why can't I access peace the way that I used to? But what if the issue isn't that your spirit is disconnected? What if your body is just depleted? What if part of spiritual healing is actually learning how to care for the physical body carrying your spirit through this life? Because the more I go through this myself, the more I'm realizing something really important. Your body is not separate from your healing journey. Your body is part of the healing journey. And when your nervous system's dysregulated, or when your body's inflamed or exhausted, or you're stuck in survival mode physically, it becomes so much harder to access emotional regulation and clarity and peace and presence. And it's not because you're broken, and it's not because you're lazy or that you're failing. It's because your system is overwhelmed. So today, I want to talk about the connection between physical healing, emotional healing, nervous system regulation, and your spiritual well being. I want to talk about why physical pain and chronic stress can interfere with your deeper healing work, and why rest sometimes is the healing work, why supporting the body matters spiritually, and how we can begin creating conditions that actually allow healing to happen gently, sustainably, and with compassion instead of pressure. We're going to talk a little bit about the nervous system, the vagus nerve, somatic healing, and the mind body connection. But more than anything, I want this episode to feel like a big exhale, like a big weight getting lifted off of you, especially if you've been carrying the shame of feeling too tired or too overwhelmed or too burned out or just too unwell to keep doing the work. Because your body isn't betraying you. It might just be asking for a partnership. So let's talk about it. Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how disconnected we've become from the body in a lot of healing conversations. We talk about mindset and manifestation, and we talk about emotional healing and trauma healing and spiritual awakening, even shadow work. But sometimes we talk about the body almost like it's separate from all of that. Like the body is just this inconvenient thing dragging behind us while we're trying to evolve spiritually. And I don't think that's true at all. I actually think that the body is constantly communicating with us. I think that the body keeps the score of what the mind tries to override. And I think that a lot of people are trying to force emotional or spiritual healing while their physical body is waving a giant red flag saying, I need support too. And I really want to normalize something here. If your body is in chronic stress, or your nervous system is overloaded, or you're like me and you're dealing with pain, exhaustion, inflammation, autoimmune issues, hormone imbalances, poor sleep, anything like that, it makes sense that healing feels harder. Because when the body doesn't feel safe, your nervous system shifts into survival. And survival mode changes everything about the way we operate and the way we think. When your system's focused on survival, it becomes a lot harder to get good rest, to regulate your emotions and your hormones, or to process trauma safely, obviously. It also makes it really difficult to feel hopeful or meditate or feel connected. And this is where I think a lot of people accidentally become cruel to themselves because instead of recognizing my system's overwhelmed, they start saying things like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? Why am I so inconsistent? Or why can everybody else seem to do this but me? I hear that one all the time. People saying things like, I can't meditate. But meanwhile, their body is running on fumes. And honestly, I think some people are trying to do deep trauma work while they're physiologically depleted. And that's important to acknowledge because healing takes energy. Real healing takes energy, okay? Your body needs resources to repair. Your nervous system needs safety to soften. Your brain, it needs rest. Your cells need nourishment. Your system needs moments where it's not constantly bracing against stress. And I think this is where spiritual healing and physical healing are actually deeply connected because taking care of your body is spiritual work and not in the like performative wellness culture kind of way and not in the optimize yourself perfectly kind of way or the pushing self improvement. I mean, the deeply compassionate way. The I'm learning how to support the body that has carried me through everything kind of way because that's sacred too. And for a long time, I unknowingly treated healing like something that happened mostly in the mind. Like if I could just think better, process more, get more regulated, or understand more of what happened, eventually I would feel better. But what I'm learning now is that you can't think your way out of a body that feels unsafe. The body has to be included in the healing process. And honestly, sometimes rest is more healing than forcing yourself into processing one more thing. Sometimes the healing that you need is nourishment or sleep or slowing down or taking your supplements, breathing deeply, gently stretching, or going for a nice, easy walk outside, or simply allowing yourself to stop fighting your body for 5 minutes. Okay, that is healing work. And I know that for some people listening, that might feel too simple. But healing is not always found in intensity. A lot of time, healing begins when the body finally feels supported enough to stop surviving. And this brings me to something that completely changed the way that I started understanding healing and honestly, just understanding myself in general. And that's the nervous system. And I know I talk about that a lot, but that's because it's really important. Because I think a lot of people assume that they're failing emotionally when what's actually happening is in their body, right? Their body never leaves survival mode. And if you've never had somebody explain this to you before, survival mode is basically the state that your body enters when it perceives danger or prolonged stress. So your nervous system shifts into defensive mode to protect you. It focuses on getting through and surviving. But the problem is the body doesn't always know the difference between a real danger, like, I don't know, getting chased by a tiger, and years of chronic stress, emotional pain, pressure, fear, grief. To your nervous system, stress is stress. So over time, your body can start living in this constant low level state of bracing, like waiting for the next shoe to drop. And you might know what I'm talking about if you feel things like your jaw being tight or your shoulders like living up by your ears, like you can never fully relax, or Maybe you just feel guilty when you sit down and take a break. Or maybe you're feeling exceptionally reactive when you're emotionally overwhelmed. Or maybe you startle really easily. Like people aren't trying to sneak up on you and you still get scared. That's not just in your head. Okay, that's your body trying to protect you. And one of the major players involved in all of this is something called the vagus nerve. And don't worry, I'm not going to turn this one into a medical lecture, but I do think that understanding this can really help people stop blaming themselves so much. So, real quick, the vagus nerve is one of the main communication pathways between your brain and your body. And it helps regulate things like your stress response and your heart rate and your digestion, even things like emotional regulation or your ability to shift out of fight or flight mode into a more restful, restorative state. Can you guys hear that? The thunder here is crazy. Anyway, what's fascinating is that your body is constantly taking in information. And most of us assume that our brains are the one that is getting all the information and making the decisions and then telling our bodies what to do. However, the way the vagus nerve works is mostly the opposite. It takes in information from what your body's experiencing and sends that to your brain so that your brain can then make decisions and do stuff with that information. And when your body starts feeling safer, your healing becomes more possible. And it's not magic and doesn't happen overnight, but your body starts reallocating energy away from survival and toward repair. And honestly, this is why I become so passionate about somatic work lately, because so many of us are trying to heal exclusively through our mind, thinking our way through healing, or analyzing or understanding our way through it. Meanwhile, your body is holding on to tension and fear and stress and inflammation and all these survival responses underneath all of it. And this is why things like breath work and grounding, even humming or gentle movement, really can have such a profound effect on your nervous system. And it matters so much. And it's not because they're trendy wellness practices, it's because they are ways of communicating safety to your body. And that really matters. Because I think when people hear the words regulate your nervous system, they feel pressured to perform wellness perfectly, like eating everything just perfectly and doing all these meditations that are still and where you're not thinking about anything. And it's not really about that. It's not about doing things perfectly. It's about support and it's about slowly teaching your body that it doesn't have to stay braced all the time. And I think a lot of our bodies are really desperate to hear that because for a long time, I approached my healing almost entirely from the emotional and spiritual side. And to be fair, that work did change my life. The mindset work, emotional healing, nervous system, spiritual practices, just learning how to reconnect with myself. All of that matters deeply. But somewhere along the way, I think I unintentionally started treating my body almost like it was supposed to just keep up, right? I like healthy food, so I never really worried about what I was putting in my body. I enjoyed exercise as a hobby, so I never really intentionally decided to work on my fitness from a wellness perspective. I always worked on it more as like a performance perspective, so another hobby or another challenge to get through. And I acted like if I could think positively enough or heal deeply enough or push enough, eventually my body would just catch up to where my mind and spirit were trying to go. Like I didn't ever make time to take care of my body. And lately, through dealing with my own autoimmune issues and physical struggles, I've been realizing how disconnected that mindset really was. I want to touch on healing, even if you can't fix your illness. This can become a big issue if you have a diagnosed chronic disease, autoimmune condition, or something that doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Because there are so many people that are dealing with these things that they can't immediately solve. And up until recently in my life, all of my ailments had been able to relatively quickly heal and be overcome. But now I'm dealing with a different type of monster. I'm dealing with something that doesn't look like it's going to go away, possibly ever. All the information that's out says this is a progressive disease. It's just going to get worse from here. And that's terrifying. And it's really difficult for me to feel regulated with that constantly swirling around in my head. And one of the hardest parts is realizing that healing is not always going to be the same thing as instantly curing it, right? Of course, I want a cure. I want this to go away. I want to be gone. But that's a deeply human desire. And I have to redefine what healing looks like for me and my future. It's going to look more like learning how to manage. It's going to look like finding new ways to cope. It's going to look like readjusting my life so that I can give myself the proper amount of rest and recovery that I'm going to need in order to fit in the moments of joy and peace and love that I desire. And the deeper I go on this journey, the more I'm realizing that you can't force a body into healing through shame or pressure or constant pushing. And honestly, I think a lot of us are trying to heal from a place of war with ourselves, trying to overpower your body or silence your symptoms or ignore the exhaustion and push through the pain. Even our society really wants us to stay productive no matter what. We keep performing these wellness things even when our system underneath is really overwhelmed. And eventually the body just says, I can't keep doing this. And that's really hard to hear. I know that from experience. But I also know that it's not because it's betraying you, it's just trying to communicate with you. And that realization has changed the way that I'm approaching my healing. So instead of asking myself, how do I force myself to heal faster? Even though, of course, that's kind of what I want, I have to start asking myself, how do I create conditions that support healing? And that feels very different. That is what my New Year's resolution was to give my body everything that it needed in order to create the proper healing conditions so that it can do its job and do the healing. And that feels so much softer and so much more compassionate and sustainable. And honestly, on a deep level, it feels more effective. So lately, I've been focusing a lot more on supporting my body instead of fighting it. So I've started doing breathing exercises to help increase my oxygen levels. I've started doing gentle movement, not guilting myself for not exercising. And when I think of exercise, instead of thinking of going for a run or lifting heavy weights, I'm thinking of gentle mind-body connection things like yoga and Tai Chi, things where I can increase my flexibility and comfort levels while connecting to my body and offering it supportive healing movements. And I want to be really clear, okay? I am not saying that I suddenly figured everything out. I haven't. This is a journey that I'm very much still on. But I already know this, that fighting my body never created healing. And partnership feels a lot better. Listening to my body, feeling compassionate towards it, and creating moments of safety. And I think that some of us have spent so long trying to transcend the body spiritually that we forgot that the body is part of this sacred experience too. Your body is not just an inconvenience to your healing journey. Your body is carrying your healing journey. And maybe for some of you listening, that's the permission that you needed today. You needed the permission to stop treating exhaustion like failure and to stop measuring your worth by your productivity, and permission to stop believing that struggling physically means that you're weak spiritually. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like pushing harder. Sometimes healing looks like finally supporting yourself gently enough so that your body begins to soften instead of bracing. I think one of the hardest parts about struggling physically for any long period of time is something that people generally don't talk about enough, and that's the emotional weight of it. Because it's not just about the symptoms themselves, it's about frustration. I mean, just think about how frustrating it is to have your body be completely unpredictable from day to day. It makes it so difficult to plan things with your family or your friends. And then there's grief, the grief that you used to be able to do that, and now you can't. Now you're constantly living in uncertainty. And there's mental exhaustion of constantly trying to feel okay, disappointment when you think that something is helping you and then you have a flare up, the fear that maybe this is just how you're going to feel forever. I mean, believe me, when I'm in the middle of a flare up, that's the biggest thing on my mind is, am I ever going to feel better? There's pressure of trying to show up for everybody else in your life while you are struggling so much yourself, just trying to make it through the day. And honestly, I think a lot of people carry shame around how much their physical health affects them emotionally. Like they should be stronger, they should be more positive, they should be more spiritual or more grateful or more disciplined. But the reality is, when your body is struggling, it has a profound effect on your mind. It has an effect on your emotions and your capacity. They're all connected. And I think that sometimes people accidentally gaslight themselves. They think, well, if I was really healed, this wouldn't bother me. Or if I was spiritually aligned enough, I'd be handling this better. Or if my mindset was stronger, maybe my body wouldn't feel this way. I heard that so many times in the personal development world that my mindset brought on my body dysfunction. And it left me feeling like anytime I got sick, it was my fault and that I brought this on myself. And that is so unfair to tell people. And I also don't really believe that healing works like that. I think that we can absolutely support the body through our mindset and through nervous system regulation and emotional healing and nutrition. I do think all of those things matter deeply, but I also think we have to stop treating ourselves like machines. And there's a very real emotional burden that comes with living in a body that feels unpredictable or exhausted or overwhelmed. And honestly, one of the things that I'm learning personally is that sometimes the healing work is not just physical. Sometimes it's grieving the pressure you've been putting on yourself. Sometimes it's grieving the version of you that thought she had to hold it all together to stay perfectly fine all the time. Sometimes it's grieving the expectation that healing should look linear or fast or aesthetically pleasing. Because real healing is messy sometimes. It's not always a beautiful Instagram reel. Some days you feel hopeful, and some days you feel exhausted, and some days you feel deeply connected to yourself. And some days you're going to feel frustrated and discouraged and disconnected from your body entirely. And I actually think that allowing space for those emotions is much healthier than trying to spiritually bypass them. Because pretending you're okay when you're struggling does not create healing, it creates suppression. And eventually, the body will carry that too. So for me, part of this season has really been learning how to meet myself where I actually am, instead of constantly demanding that I be somewhere else. And even though that sounds simple, it has been one of the hardest things for me to learn because I am somebody who loves growth. I love progress and improvement and feeling capable and strong and productive and disciplined. That is me in a nutshell. So when I have to learn how to sit with limitation and uncertainty and healing that is slower than I would like it to be, it's really made me stretch emotionally in ways that I have not expected. But weirdly enough, I think on some level, it's also softening me, right? It's teaching me compassion in a deeper way, and it's teaching me patience, and it's teaching me that worth is not earned through productivity, and it's teaching me that support is not weakness. And I want to let you know right now, those are difficult lessons to learn, and they are lessons that I did not want to learn. But honestly, I think a lot of people listening need this. They need to hear this and they need support much more than they need pressure because healing is already hard enough. And you don't need to become your own enemy on top of it. And I think this is also why support matters so much more than people realize when you're going through something physically difficult. Because when your body is struggling for a long time, it can become very isolating emotionally, even when you have people around you, even when you're functioning, even when you're still showing up for life. There's something just really exhausting about carrying an invisible battle inside your own body every day while trying to act like everything's normal. And after a while, I think a lot of people stop feeling supported. They start feeling like they're managing their life instead of actually living it. And that's part of why I wanted to make this episode in the first place, because I know that there are people listening right now who are quietly carrying so much more than the people around them probably even realize. People who are trying so hard to stay hopeful and stay positive and keep moving forward while also feeling deeply tired underneath all of that. And I just don't think that we're meant to carry that alone. I just don't. I think healing happens in relationship, in safe spaces, in conversations where you don't feel judged or rushed or expected to have everything figured out already. Because most of the time, what people need is not another protocol or another productivity system. And it's definitely not another person telling them to just stay positive. Sometimes what they need is someone who can sit with them in the reality of what they're experiencing without trying to minimize it. Someone who can help them reconnect to themselves when they feel disconnected. Someone who can help them regulate when everything feels totally overwhelming. And someone who can remind them that struggling does not mean they're failing. Honestly, I think the emotional side of healing matters a lot more than people realize because your body responds to the environment that we create internally too. It responds to chronic stress and to pressure and to fear and to constantly feeling like it's not safe to slow down or to fall apart or need help. And after a while, that emotional weight lives somewhere. You carry it in your body, in your nervous system, in the way that your body moves through the world, which is part of why support can be so healing in the first place. Not because somebody else fixes you, but because being emotionally supported helps the body stop feeling so alone in what it's carrying. So when we create more emotional safety, more support, more compassion, your body responds to that. And not because support magically cures anything, but because human beings were not designed to heal entirely alone. And I think for me personally, one of the biggest shifts has been realizing that I don't need to earn support by completely falling apart first. I don't have to wait until I'm at my absolute limit before I allow myself to be helped. And maybe somebody listening, maybe that somebody is you, needs to hear that as well. You're allowed to need support while you're still functioning. You are allowed to ask for help before you completely burn out. And you are allowed to admit that something feels heavy. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. And honestly, I think there's something very healing about finally being honest about where you actually are instead of constantly trying to perform strength through your suffering. Now, I want to give you a few very simple things that you can start practicing while you're figuring out what your next right step looks like. And these are not things that are going to force healing, and they're not things to pressure yourself with. They're just small ways to begin reconnecting with your body in a safer, more compassionate way. I think a lot of people dealing with chronic stress or chronic illness get disconnected from their own bodies after a while. Almost like your body's become the enemy somehow. It's like that thing that's keeping you down, or the thing that you're always frustrated with, or like me, the thing that you're constantly trying to fix. And when that relationship becomes strained, healing starts feeling really difficult. So instead of approaching the body from pressure, I think it can be really powerful to start approaching it from curiosity and support instead. Even something as simple as placing your hand on your chest and taking a slow breath can matter a lot more than people realize. And that's not because it magically fixes everything, but because it interrupts the constant state of tension that so many people are living in without even noticing it. Also, gentle stretching can help, or going for a slow walk without turning it into another performance metric. Even taking a few moments to just notice what your body's feeling without immediately judging it or trying to change it can be incredibly healing over time. And honestly, I think one of the biggest shifts for me has been realizing that somatic healing is not about forcing the body to perform. It's about rebuilding trust with a body that may have been carrying too much for too long. And that changes the energy of your healing because now the question becomes, how do I support my body in feeling safe enough, and not how do I force my body to heal? And I know that for me personally, the softer approach has been a lot more healing than constantly trying to fight my way back into wellness. And if this conversation is resonating with you, if you are realizing that your body or your nervous system and your emotional world are all more connected than you thought, and you want support navigating that, I would really love to help. Because sometimes it's really hard to know what your next right step is when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes you just need someone who can help you slow down, reconnect to yourself, and gently guide you towards the things that are most likely to bring your system relief and support. And whether that's nervous system work or somatic practices or simply learning how to stop fighting yourself all the time, that support should be available to you. So I want to let you know that I do offer one-on-one healing sessions where we can really explore what's going on beneath the surface and create a healing approach that actually feels supportive for you specifically. And to get started, we just do a free 30-minute session where we go over exactly what you're struggling with and what the next right steps for you are. And you're going to leave with so much clarity and understanding. It's going to be really profound and helpful. So you can find the link for that in the show notes and just schedule a call with me. I promise I don't bite. And even if all you do after this episode is take one deeper breath, or soften the way you speak to yourself, that matters too. So until next time, don't forget, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.